What's going on, everybody? It's your boy JRich, back for another episode of Across the Pod with my main man, Tom. If you missed it, we already talked about defenders heading into Game Week 1 for FPL to get your team sorted, and today we're tackling arguably the toughest position. We're going to be hitting the midfield today. A lot of players we need to discuss, so many in that $7.5 to $6 mil range, and picking the right ones can be instrumental to having a great start in FPL. But Tom, how are you doing, my friend, and are you excited to talk midfielders today on this episode?
Yeah, I'm all good. I think midfield is where you're going to make or break your team this year. I think the template for defenders and forwards is pretty set. And I think your strategy on going Bruno versus no Bruno, picking up premium mids versus some budget enablers, that's what's going to actually get you ranked this season. So yeah, excited to get into it. And I think we can start with the premium midfielders.
Yes, absolutely. You talked about it. Bruno Fernandes or no Bruno. I remember going into last season, one of our biggest talking points was, do we have Salah in the team or do we not? Obviously, he has now moved on out of the Premier League, but we're in another situation where we have Haaland up at 15 million. Okay, we're all used to him being very high. You either have him in the team or you don't, but now we have the same situation with Bruno, the highest priced midfielder at 12 million, next Saka at 9.5. So much more than a lot of great players in the Premier League that are great for FPL. You wanted to ask me a question about Bruno, in or out of the team? Currently, as it stands, I am leaning towards out, and we will get into some of the reasons why on this show because of what he can enable you for your midfield. But when it comes to Bruno, obviously scored almost as many points as Haaland, still 3 million cheaper than Haaland if you want him in the team. Having both in your team, as we kind of discussed even on the Defender show, is extremely difficult when you're trying to make the rest of your team strong. But as it stands right now, I think I'm leaning towards out. And I'm also leaning towards out for Saka as well. Minutes concerns, playing time. Again, Arsenal as a whole, kind of trying to avoid them. But when it comes to Bruno and Saka, the two most expensive midfielders, I think I'm currently out. And I don't know if that's going to change. Maybe Bruno, but Saka will definitely not be in my team.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. It's really tough because he's around 48% owned overall. And if you look at the top managers who are finishing top 10K, top 1K, I think he's about in 90 to 100% of those teams. And I think the issue is if he does well, which he will against Hull and Ipswich, it's going to be a real rank killer and you're going to be chasing. But you're basically unable to get Bruno in at 12 million if you commit to him not from the start. So I think if you're going without him, you have to say, look, he's going to do well against Ipswich and Hull, and then just hold and just be brave and go into game week 3 to 8. What I would say is two things from last season. I went without Salah from the start when every one of the engaged managers went with him. And I got a real boost in rank ahead of everyone else because everyone switched, realized Salah dropped off, wasn't worth that much money, tried to switch the value around their team. So I do think there is upside in doing it. Obviously, it's a risk. And then as well, yes, can you replicate 21 assists this season? I don't know. For that, and similarly, he was 8.5 at the start of the season last season.
Yes. And
people still weren't picking him then. So the 4 million jump, I know, year on year it changes, but 4 million jump, I just don't know whether I can justify that. And on the right-hand side, you can see points per million. He's lower than the likes of Saka, Semenyo, Gibbs-White, Cunha, and Mbeumo in terms of actual value you're getting per the player.
Yeah, and that's where I struggle so much. I feel like this is a yearly discussion for us in FPL because that range is so difficult to make it work. I remember trying to get Palmer in my team after his fantastic season. That didn't work out. Salah didn't work out. And I think as well, Saka was also extremely highly priced going into last season. Wirtz was very expensive going into last season. Obviously, he was coming over from the Bundesliga, but I feel like in the way that I build, it's so hard for me to go against Erling Haaland. He's so great when you captain him almost every single week. He scores so many goals. You know the upside is there. Bruno outperformed his expected assists, which again is kind of not a sticky metric when it comes to expected assists, but it was over double his expected assists, right? It's a little bit stickier with goals and easier to track. But when a player is outperforming their expected assists by so much, you have to say, okay, well, the next season, probably some regression is coming. I still think he's going to be great. And like you said, I'm so worried about if he does start hot because those two matchups are so good. I'm worried that if United gets off to a hot run, you see the Cunhas and Mbeumo also on this list. They're all going to rise in price. But as you said, it's so much harder to build a team without Fernandes and then need to put him in the team than if you have him in the team to start, then to try and remove him after the fact, pivoting to any of these players below. So I'm still leaning towards out. I love that third man on the list, Semenyo. phenomenal at City last season when he got over at City, scored so many goals, like the early season schedule. I think Semenyo is almost a lock for my team, but Gibbs-White will certainly give him a run for my money. But chances are for my team, hoping to get both of them in.
Yeah, and that's the thing around team structure. I think for me, Semenyo also a lock. Preseason 5 assists. I know a lot of people think under Maresca's new system, he's going to play out wide. But if you've watched the highlights from the game, there's no way you watch those and watch the passing, the directness, the assists, how he's playing, and don't pick him. At 8.5, 17 goals last season, he's a lock in my team as well. I wasn't going Semenyo at the start, and then I've watched it and just reflected on it. I can't see going without Semenyo. I think he's as close to locked in that City team as you can get. And that's the issue for me with Bruno is I've written a list of basically all the attackers that I want. And if I pick Bruno in my team, I have to sacrifice having Semenyo and Mbeumo in there basically, and maybe one or two others. Whereas if I just go without Bruno, I basically get every other player that I want and just forgo one player. Now, he might absolutely pop off and it might not pay off dividends, but for me, I want to spread my money more and go across 2 or 3 different assets. And I think you're right on Saka. It's too early coming back from the World Cup. Don't know, managing minutes early on. The Coventry at home fixture does excite me, but I just don't even know if he'll play. And past that, not much point in having him. Gibbs-White is interesting because he's the best points per million value out of all of these premium mids. Completely overlooked in many drafts. 15 goals, 4 assists, and playing 10 for Forest. On penalties as well. It wasn't even someone that I'd even looked at until the data. So for me, at the same price point as Cunha and Mbeumo, who he outperformed, like looking at the stats again, and everyone's got Cunha or Mbeumo in there. A tough one on Gibbs-White, but I don't know. Was he in your team?
He, I think, is going to be in just about no matter what. I've run some numbers in terms of value. You know, you talk about points per million. That's obviously a big factor. But I think to what happened last year, right? We talked about Forest. They had a great fixture run early. Gibbs-White was in your team, wasn't in my team. I went more with the defensive route. But like, there was so much potential for Forest and everything just went wrong for them. But in the second half, that's when Gibbs-White really took off. And so if you look to his season-long numbers, right, where you're looking at points per 90, they're not overly impressive. But if you break that down and throw it more towards second half when he really started to play well, which obviously leads towards into this season, he was significantly better. And so for the savings you can have by not having Bruno, like for me, that pivot is almost worth it. Even though I think United can be great this year, even though I know Bruno's going to score a ton of points, I think saving that $4 million going from Fernandes to Gibbs-White is going to be worth it in the end because he's probably going to be very well. He'd probably do very well. And while I'm still a bit so-so on how successful Forrest can be, I know that Gibbs-White can do it on his own because we saw him do it at the end of last year. So I think that's where I'm looking at Semenyo and Gibbs-White as like my foundation. And like you said, when you don't have Fernandes in the team, getting 2 of those 8 million midfielders is very feasible for your team, rather than if you have him in the team, you can't. It just doesn't really work out unless you're going very, very thin at all your bench spots. So I think I'm leaning more towards the balanced approach, you know, rotate the fixtures and having players who are available every single week than trying to jam all the highest priced, highest scoring players into my FPL team.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it kind of makes sense when you look at Cole Palmer at 9.5. I think Gibbs-White is probably a better asset this year. So 100%. Why are you paying 1.4 million for Cole Palmer? I think the narrative is there for Palmer, like snub from the World Cup, wants to come back and do prove everyone wrong. So I think the story was nice, and he was in my first draft, and because I like him as the differential, because not many people are going for him. Yeah. But I think from preseason, he was training alone for one of the preseason games. He then played 88 minutes in one of the preseason games and didn't score. João Pedro scored 2 or something. I just think you obviously have penalties for Palmer as well, but is the allure of penalties enough to pay 2 million more than João Pedro, who's probably going to play centrally, get more minutes, and could score more goals with Palmer's playing on the right? I just think save yourself 2 million and just get one Chelsea asset in João Pedro.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. You know, you talk about Palmer being 2 million less, so is Morgan Rogers, who's going to play in the exact same position on the opposite side. Sure, he won't have penalties, but they're playing the same position. They're all going to benefit from each other. And I think that's where you look to, do you really need to spend up 2 million for the penalty taker on Chelsea? Yeah. I'd say not necessarily, but let's move on, because Man United have 3 players on this list. You have Fernandes at the top, you have Cunha and Mbeumo. Who do you prefer? Because I got to be honest, as much as I like all three of them this year, Cunha's probably my least favorite when it comes to players that I would have, especially when it comes to the price. But the other question is, and we obviously aren't talking forwards today, but why not just have Šeško? Right, as one of your forwards, he'd be a differential. He's not overly expensive. If you think this Man United attack is very, very strong, they'll all be a part of it. But he's kind of the forgotten man. He's the cheapest, and he could actually have the best goal output of all four of them, outside of maybe Bruno because of penalties.
Yeah, I think Sesko, he's injured though, so I think if he was up and fit, I think he might be playing like maybe game week 2, game week 3. But they've been doing every preseason with Mbeumo at 9. And you got to remember Hull and Ipswich are the first 2 games. So if Mbeumo is starting at 9 for those 2 games, 8 million, I want him in.
He better score 2 goals.
Yeah. My issue is I don't know for my team. I guess there's 2 questions, and this is why I want to ask you. Is Mbeumo enough to just cover Fernandes on his own? And then given the fixtures, is it worth even doubling up on Bruno or Mbeumo or Cunha and Mbeumo for the Hull and Ipswich, and then look to a route to Chelsea assets or City after game weeks 1 and 2?
If I was to do that, it would have to be Bruno and Mbeumo. I don't think I could do that with Cunha. I just don't think it makes sense. I find, especially, I've been there before. I've had Cunha, Mbeumo, and Fernandes in my team. It feels like only one of them really has a good game when they score a lot of goals. Fernandes is obviously the most likely because of penalties. He gets a ton of assists, all that. He has a lot of avenues to scoring points. Mbeumo wasn't really quite there, but he's a great goal scorer. Obviously, he plays the 9 when Šeško's hurt or someone's unavailable, which is always great. And he's obviously phenomenal in that role as a goal scorer. And being that midfield spot, playing the forward role, obviously you get the extra point per goal, which is nice as well. Cunha's the one I can't figure out. It doesn't seem... This year, his starting spot is solidified for sure. I'd say he's going to be playing on that left side probably most of the time. But going into last year, the minutes uncertainty for him was very difficult, and Mbeumo was the one that played every week. So I think even going into this year, where Cunha may be better than last year, I just think you should take the solidity of Mbeumo at the same price. He'll probably score more goals, less assists, but I think it will work out in the end for Mbeumo.
Yeah, I mean, very similar outputs from the last season, but I think Mbeumo will probably... Shorter term, better pick. Longer term, I don't know if Sesko comes back in. Mbeumo will share minutes with Ahmad on the right wing, whereas Cunha will play in the left 10 and play for 90 minutes. And we saw that a few times when I owned Mbeumo last season, coming off in 70 minutes against a team already 3-0 up, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
So I think short term, I like Mbeumo. Cunha's probably more minutes in the game, but I'm with you. I think Bruno's the best United asset, then Mbeumo, then Cunha for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Do you have any more thoughts on our premium assets that you want to get into, or do you want to get into the next tier, guys?
Let's go down the rank. Let's go down.
Okay. My favorite, the value bracket. This is easily, as we kind of said off the top, the toughest group to figure out who are the best targets, who are the guys you need in your team. Do you skip this tier altogether because maybe you want to go a bit stars and scrubs, a lot of high 8 mil guys and some 4.5, 5.5 mil guys, because there are options there as well. But at the top here, you have Bournemouth's Ryan, who I love personally, favorite of mine, only played about half the season last year for Bournemouth, should play every single game on that right side. I'd be curious what they do at the 10 because obviously Krupi is injured, not going to be playing that 10 spot this year. But Ryan, great player, up and down last season. What are your thoughts on him? You have him as the highest on this board here. What are your thoughts on Ryan?
Yeah, I really like him. I think obviously it's a smaller sample size because he played less minutes, but the way, Krupi out and a few others, if he plays every game, I think points per million, he's the best value on this list. It's just, are Bournemouth fixtures too difficult? Is the minutes risk too much? Is he a long-term pick? Is it a wait and see? Not too sure. But points per million, I think Ryan and Foden look, points per 90 as well, look the strongest. So I think those two up there for that reason. Ryan, obviously, 5 goals, 2 assists last season. Can you replicate that and continue to push on and use that as a basis? Potentially, that's why I like him. I think Phil Foden's an interesting one. He's, similar price point. And the issue is if you're going with Haaland and Bruno, you're probably going to have to pick at least 2 or 3 midfielders from this list and below. Therefore, you probably want players that are guaranteed to play. And I think with Ryan and Foden, are they a risk in terms of minutes? Especially Foden. You've got Cherki, Anderson, O'Reilly, Aït-Nouri, Doku. Where's Foden actually fit in this system? We don't know. You've got Marmoush as well, who's playing with him pre-season. Is he going to play 90 minutes every week? Probably not. Has he looked good in pre-season? Not really. I don't even think he's got an assist, whereas Semenyo's got 5, for instance. I think for me, he just doesn't quite look like the 23-24 Phil Foden. But if he starts the first few games, I think if you don't go with him against Bournemouth at home and he scores, his price is going to be 7.4 by the time
Probably
of game week 3. So everyone's going to jump on that bandwagon. So 7 million is obviously great value if he can replicate that. And obviously his stats were still relatively good last season for coming off the bench, considering he didn't play very much.
Yeah.
But the issue is for me, I think if you're going City and triple City, which I think I might be from the start, I want 3 players that I know are going to be on that team sheet regardless. And I think Elliot Anderson could offer similar output at 6.5, save 0.5 million. I think he'll get more than I think it was 5 goals and 4, or even 4 goals and 4 assists last season for Forest. I think he's going to get more chance to get more attacking output this season and still maintain a similar level of DEFCON. I think there was some in-depth analysis done around ball retrieval and that counting as a DEFCON. And if you do a progressive pass forward, it counts as a separate DEFCON. So people are actually projecting that Anderson's numbers could be similar, even though City obviously aren't going to play as defensive as Forest. They could still be above that threshold. So for me, a more attacking Elliot Anderson with still DEFCON potential, I think, as long as he's playing 90 every season, which, Rodri looks like he's leaving, I think Anderson is probably Foden. I like Foden's ceiling, but for me, Anderson's probably a safer bet for City.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. If I was ranking the assets in City, Anderson would be ahead of Foden just about every single time. It's not even really that close. And I think the other part of it that you brought up is the DEFCON aspect of it. Of course, Foden's offensive output can be significantly higher than Anderson's, but when you talk about the consistent minutes, right, the lack of rotation we expect from the player that was just signed, paid, 120 million for, right? He's going to probably play every single week, every game. And the DEFCON aspect, along with the consistent minutes and how great he played in the World Cup for England, I'd be absolutely floored if he wasn't playing 90 every game and a huge part of what they do, both offensively and defensively, because of how well they retain the ball on a consistent basis, right? How much they overpower teams with their pure skill and the way they play football. So Anderson, for me, as a player, I would love to have in the team. The question is he going to be my third City asset? Because I'm so locked in on Haaland and Semenyo that that third asset's very difficult to figure out who should it be. And it may be Anderson, it may be it's probably not going to be Foden, but then there's also the defensive side of O'Reilly and Gahey and other great assets as well. So I like Anderson a lot. If you want to put Anderson in your team at 6.5, I think he's phenomenal value, and I don't hate it at all. But do you want to aim for a slightly higher offensive ceiling? Ismail Assar, who I love but was injured last season and didn't really get going overall. Szoboszlai, who again played some defense last year but still was great offensively and looks to be even more offensive this year. Florian Wirtz, second year in the Prem. Isak healthy, I think it's great for him. Obviously increases his assist potential by a lot. And then, of course, last but not least on this list, Morgan Rogers. 10 goals, 6 assists last season, playing in Chelsea. Again, is the assist potential very high for him? Absolutely. But competing with Palmer and João Pedro for goals and assists will be interesting to see how managers manage that, because at 7.5, he seems like an absolute steal if this Chelsea attack is as good as we expect. But are you willing to put him in your team at 7.5 in that unknown that is the Chelsea squad right now?
Yeah, I think it's the thing that every season you have a shiny new toy who's made a big transfer and you want to go for Rodgers and now a better team in Chelsea. And it's always a bit of a risk. He could pop off at the start and then, you've gone with him. I think for me, I'm going to play a little bit safer and probably avoid Chelsea for now. Going into a Chelsea team that has, 25 midfielders to pick from, he's probably playing in that left attacking midfield position, which I don't even know how much he played like that. I think he did for Villa a few times, but obviously he's mostly central attacking mid. I don't know whether he's going to be minutes risk. Is he going to play only 70? For me, he's wait and see. What I would say is he's probably at an easy price point to switch to. So if you're going for the likes of Cunha and Mbeumo, you have Cunha or Mbeumo for Hull and Ipswich. And if Rodgers is doing well, you just switch to Rodgers in game week 3 when Man United's fixtures change.
Yeah, I mean, you have to hope, because the only issue is I believe he's almost 40% or maybe even over 40% in terms of his ownership currently. Some of those Chelsea assets, talk about João Pedro, I believe he's over 50% at the forward spot. Rodgers is over 40%. So, you talked about Bruno and how heavily owned he is as well. Rodgers is another case like that. If he starts very strong, his price is going to go up. It's going to be very difficult to get him into your team, and his price will rise extremely quickly. But going back to the Liverpool side, I talked about on the Defender show how Liverpool's fixtures open up and start very strong. Dominik Szoboszlai, 7 million, Wirtz at 7.5. Which is your favorite of the two there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm seeing Szoboszlai in like most people's drafts at
Yeah,
7
very
million.
popular.
I like it. Like he's on set pieces. He's going to play more of an advanced role with 6 goals, assists output. It's probably going to increase if he's going to play in a progressive 8 within an Areola system. Um, Compare that with Florian Wirtz, who didn't have a great season last season, but under a new manager could be completely different. I think the manager's come out and said, we want to play him as basically a second striker. So like he's sitting a centre forward right behind Isak. If those two can link up, like Wirtz scored a very good goal in pre-season, hasn't looked fantastic or that involved, and I think struggled at time in the Premier League last season. But for 0.5 more, I think I'd be tempted to take the risk on Wirtz
Okay.
to see how it goes, and then maybe switch down to Szoboszlai. I think Szoboszlai is the safer pick. He's going to be consistent. He's going to play 90 minutes. He's on all set pieces, and Van Dijk scored 6 headers last season
Yeah.
and should have scored more. So for me, it's probably close between the two. Do you save 0.5? If you need the 0.5 elsewhere, I just take Szoboszlai, but also I do quite like the upside of Wirtz.
Yeah, no, that's the conundrum, right? Because you do save the 0.5 with Szoboszlai, but then you also have the differential aspect of Wirtz, right? And he is a huge differential. He's going to be playing in that center forward role, which is basically what Krupi played last year. I really, really like him in that role. I think he could thrive in that role. So from that aspect, for me, like, it's interesting, but the hard part is that do you have that 0.5 in your budget? Because the team that I've made most recently, I don't. So I do lean Szoboszlai, which is tough because then you are leaning into the masses, the ownership, and you're not getting as unique. So if he scores points, you're just not getting less for it in terms of your rank. But overall, I love this list. I think there's a lot of great players on this list. I wouldn't be shying away from other guys in this range a whole lot. I think this is your core build for the players you want to look at in this price range. But my favorites probably would be Anderson is up there. I love Sarr. I think he's a great 6.5 mil player. Again, he's going to give you almost nothing in terms of DEFCON, but with the way that Mateta has struggled and how much Sarr has thrived on that right side, I really like him there. Now the system will be a bit different, but I still really like him a lot in terms of his attacking threat. But again, not a whole lot defensively. And then second would probably be Szoboszlai and Wirtz there. I just love them both in that system. I think they're both going to be really, really good. Do you have any other thoughts on guys you like, your top 3 or players you're targeting for your team?
I think of this list, I think Anderson and Wirtz are probably the two that I'm most excited by. So they're probably the two that will potentially be in there. The rest, I don't know. We can maybe move on to value enablers. There might be a few more that take our fancy.
Yeah, so we have our budget enablers, 4.5 mil to 6 mil. You've given us 8. Obviously, there's so many options here, but let's start at the top with Ndiaye, who, again, I kind of talked to you about him off of the show, where 6 million on penalties, great offensive threat. He can get assists as well. Struggled a bit last season, didn't play every single game, but I think he'll be back to full health and playing. There was the concerns he may go to Saudi. That has now been put to rest. He'll be at Everton for this season. Love him. He's going to be in my team. I think he's an absolute must at 6 million, even though his ownership is quite high.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think he's kind of going a bit under the radar. I think given the links to Saudi and it was like almost going to go ahead, I think many people had him in at the start and then they were like, took him out and have reshifted their teams. And now he's committed to Everton. It's kind of like you've got a 6 million midfielder on penalties with expected points of 4.74 per 90. Probably the best like points per million you can get in the game. I think at that price point, 6 million, he's the best player you can get. The other two, which I'm seeing, which I think on this list of budget enablers, you want someone that's playing 90 minutes guaranteed. If you're going to pay a little bit more than 4.5, whatever, for the last spot, you want someone that's playing 90. And I think the safest bets are Ndiaye, attacking for Everton, plays 90, Talisman, on pens. You've got Lafay for Sunderland, which I think playing in the 10, 5 goals, 6 assists last season, good value, not super exciting, but will play 90 in the 10, get some goals and assists, will tick along and have a few penalties. And then Pascal Groß, which I think is probably the most owned of the 3 in terms of what I'm seeing for engaged managers. Obviously the managers come out and said they want to have a real focus on set pieces this year. Groß takes the set pieces.
Yep.
As well as that, with Welbeck going, he's going to be on penalties, most likely. So a very creative player who last season was injured for the majority of it, hence his stats are low. But in the previous seasons, tends to get between 5 and 10 goals and 5 and 10 assists. So I think he's at 5.5, pretty good value. It's just whether you think your last midfield slot is by Gross, or do you spread the money and go for like the one? Like, would you rather have Rodgers for 2 million more and cut Fernand? For me, that's the thing. If cutting Fernandes down to Mbeumo, I get 4 million, and then I don't need to go for any of these players, and I just take Wirtz and Semenyo and Rodgers, for instance. Whereas not having sacrifice for Gross, you got to put it together as a package of looking at those players as a collective. I do think Gross is still good value, but for me, I'm probably going to go more premium. I guess the only other things to mention on this list is if you want to go for DEFCON, which some players like to play for that, I prefer DEFCON for defenders because there's more routes to points with the clean sheets. You've got Ampadu and Sangare in the midfield section where they're both averaging around the DEFCON threshold. So they're going to pick up points. You're going to look every week. They're probably going to get on average 4 points. Ampadu did get an assist in preseason, and he does tend to, get involved in some play. He might be playing more advanced this season, according to some Leeds fans. And Sangare, coming from a different league, still got good DEFCON. In preseason, got 14 DEFCONs. So, might be involved in some goals for Brentford. I think the one thing which I thought was interesting was looking at someone on Twitter, as I was reading, was quite interesting. For Sangare, they looked at his what his bonus points would have been for playing in League One, and based on like the amount of tackles and passing and that kind of thing, if he would get, I think he would on average like 25% of games. So at some games he's going to be on just getting DEFCON and getting the odd 1 or 2 bonus points just from the way he plays in the Premier League system for points. He's going to get like 4 or 5 points just for like a game where he does nothing, like no goals, no assists. Brentford lose 2-1. He's on 5 points. That's quite interesting for a 5.5. He's
5.0. Yeah, he's 5.0.
Okay, well, for a 5.0 midfielder, that feels quite exciting. So
yeah, that's the one player that stood out to me because, again, I've been trying to find, a balanced approach. I'm not looking for the 4.5 midfielders or the 5.0s, but if you can have a player like that at least offers you DEFCON, then it's much more intriguing. I did want to hear your thoughts on this Villa kid, though, because he's very exciting. He's obviously new and kind of coming back, but I mean, at the price point of 6 million, it's somewhat expensive depending on what you value. But if Villa is as good as I think they can be, even though there's a lot of turnover there, a lot changing, they brought in some good players. And I do think they're on the right track still. Do you think at 6 million, he could be a player that you take a shot on early? Or do you think you kind of wait to see how he acclimates to the squad, how much he plays before you'd gamble on him there?
Yeah, I think he was great for Norwich a couple of seasons ago, and he came in, like Villa played a lot for him, came into a new team. Looked absolutely fantastic, but just got injured. And I think last season he came off the bench quite a lot, got a lot of goals and assists. Points per 90 and points per million is actually really good value. Mm-hmm. It's just we don't really know who's going to play for Villa. Is he going to play in that system? Is Manzambi going to play in the 10 instead of Rodgers? Or is it going to be Buendia? He scored 3 goals in preseason already, looks really good. It's probably a wait and see, but if he's going to be the new 10, the new Rodgers for Villa at 6 million and already has the potential to score goals and assists in the Premier League, it's definitely one that I would shift to early if he starts doing well.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those I was very intrigued by. Kluivert's another one that, again, he feels like an FPL staple. He'll have those stretches if he's healthy and playing a lot where he can be really good. But I think the inconsistencies we've seen from him over the last couple of years is where things get tougher to put him in your team, even at 6 million, because he's just a little bit too inconsistent for me. But I love Ndiaye. I love Pascal Groß if you can get him in the team, especially a little bit cheaper. And Fée because he's going to be creative. He's on penalties. It's just, again, if you can have a penalty taker at this price range, it's very, very good. But the side of me that's difficult is like last year, leaning into DEFCON was very profitable to some extent for your rank. Having that consistent scoring is good. I feel like we've been looking at all of these options through the defenders and midfielders and not focusing on DEFCON, but it's just so easy to be tantalized by the upside of some of these players as well. But is there any other players you wanted to touch on? I brought up Jeremy Doku to you. He was great at the end of last season. He's still 7.5 million, which makes it tough to get him in the squad. We talked about Rodgers. We talked about Foden, who's cheaper than him. Elliot Anderson, $1 million cheaper than him. But the upside we know is there for Doku if everything goes right. Would you ever consider having him in the team right off the jump at 7.5, or do you think that you're kind of stay away because you just don't know what to expect from City and you're a little bit unsure about Doku overall?
I think Doku, if you get him for the right stretch of games where he's electric and he strings it together, got like 3 assists in a game, scores 2 goals, gets an assist, and he's on like 15-pointer, 17-pointer, it's absolutely electric. It's just finding the right time where Doku has that slot lockdown in the team and is going to play. I think it's too early for me to risk that. Like Doku last season was 6 million, 6.5 million, maybe 7, no more than that. This season, he's very expensive for the risk that comes with owning him. If he plays every week for City in the first 3 game weeks, I might even pivot down Semenyo for Doku if he's doing well and just save the money elsewhere, or get Elliot Anderson and be like, look, I want a more attacking City asset. If he's going to play every week, his ceiling is far higher. And I think he's probably a better asset than Phil Foden.
Yeah, no, and that's where I completely agree. If that spot is truly locked down from Doku, he's a phenomenal value because he's going to score a ton of points. We saw it last year, whether it was assists, he was scoring fantastic goals at the end of the year. He's just a player that the potential is there. You just need the consistency in terms of minutes. You need him to play every single week. And then more importantly, you just need to be confident he's going to be healthy as well because he has been banged up from time to time. So that is very difficult. But City as a whole, there's a few assets you love and a lot of potential rotation within there as well. That's what makes it so difficult. But I hope that everyone watching this found some value in our midfield breakdown. Tom, you brought a ton of fantastic names to the table that I think people should be aware of. Go look at different situations and think about how do you want to construct your team, because how you want to construct is really going to determine what you do in the midfield. What you do up front, what you do in the defense can kind of change a little bit and it's pretty easy to maneuver, but what you do in the midfield is really going to set the foundation for your team this year. Do you have any final thoughts on the way out, strategy, etc., or are you just about done with the midfield for today?
The only thing is that Sangare that was on that slide, that's 5.0 for Forest. The Brentford midfielder is 5.5. So that's why. So the Sangare for Brentford, I think, is the better option than the Sangare for Forest. So just be careful if you're going for a Sangare. Pick the right one. That's everything, though.
Sweet. Thank you, everybody, for tapping in. Make sure you like and subscribe and check out our Defender breakdown if you haven't seen it yet. We will see you guys later for the forward breakdown. And next week, we'll be finally dropping our official team for Across the Pod. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we'll see you guys next time. We are out. Peace.